Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Above the Bar podcast. It's your host, Sean. We are bellying up. It's the end. Believe this or not, we have come to the end almost of the first month of the new year of 2025 and no apocalypse yet. I don't know what's going on, but somehow we've made it through. And since we've made it through, that means all the relationships that you thought that you were just going to ignore, that you were going to do nothing with, you didn't need to change anything. We have brought someone in to help tell you how to break those patterns, how to change those things, how to fix those relationships. So joining us from probably like 20 minutes away from me, not that far at all. Joining us from, we're just going to go with parts unknown though. Wait, just make sure I got all my sound effects set up right. Sometimes these things are all jacked up for me. See, that's what happens. This will sound even better now. So joining us from parts unknown, it's Miss Joëlle Lydon.
Yay. So parts on, actually, I think you're in Rensselaer and I'm on the other side of the Hudson. So I'm like near Schenectady. So that area.
See, that's parts unknown. This is the only place on the planet I've ever been at where it's like people are like, oh, you're on that side of the river. Like it makes no sense. Like, what side of the Hudson are you on? I've yet to be able to understand why they do that around here. And if you're way out towards Schenectady, like you're literally like in another country as far as people around here. You're like,
yeah, I'm actually even farther out. I'm like towards Dwaynesburg, towards Discovery County. So I'm even like farther afield. So
yeah, you're in So Scary County.
So Scary County.
So Scary County, yeah. That's what we call it. So you're way out there. So Miss Joëlle is going to join us here, and we're going to be talking about relationships and how to break free of old relationship patterns. A lot of times we get involved in relationships and we think, well, this is how I do a relationship. And sometimes, guess what, folks? If you're still doing the same things over and over and you think it's everybody else, but you're the single common denominator, it's probably you. I'm just going to throw that out there to you. So, but before we get into all that, let's go ahead and take care of some house cleaning around here. As always, over my right shoulder, it's the big board for Sticker and a Cause. Maybe you've got your own thing, a podcast, you've doing your own relationship coach, and I don't care what it is, a band, and you've got stickers for it. You can reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok. Our website is the abovethebarpodcast.com. Email abovethebarpodcast@gmail.com. Reach out to us. Let us know what you got going on. I'll tell you where to send this sticker to, and we'll read about it live here on the air. Won't cost you a dime. That Sticker and a Cause. Someday we're going to fill this whole thing up, Joëlle. And when it's all filled up, I'm going to attempt to auction it off, but I don't know if that'll do anything. And if we auction it off, maybe we'll give the money to some charity somewhere. But we're going to try to get it all filled up one day, someday. But that being said, now we got to talk about our sponsors, and you know, those doors next to you, that shutter looking door right there. Did you know our sponsors are Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Budget Blinds of Hudson and Cooksaki, and Budget Blinds of Schoharie? We were just talking about So Scary County, and Budget Blinds of Schoharie. They are North America's largest window treatment company with over 1,500 locations between U.S. and Canada, and they focus on everything from shades, blinds, shutters, drapery. They'll do window tinting, and they do all of it. And what's pretty impressive, you can motorize all these things, voice activation. You could be, if you're a traveler and you're looking for something to help you out, you're out of town, give them a call. They can help you out with all these things. And this month, for got a couple days left here, they're doing 20% off of all orders. And if you motorize anything, they're going to take an extra 5% off. And as always, if you tell them that you're there to belly up to the bar, that's where you heard about them, they're going to give you 5 additional percent off. So it's a pretty good deal here. You motorize something, you could be almost 30% off your entire order. So make sure you're reaching out to Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Budget Blinds of Hudson and Cooksaki, and budget blinds is scary. Sorry, Miss Joe. All that stuff's
That's
done.
awesome. Like tinting of the windows. That's
Oh,
kind of cool. Like the cars, I do it in cars so that people can't see indoors.
that's it. And I will tell you from personal experience with the window tinting side of things. Um, what's pretty amazing about it is it's an easy way to cover your windows, maintain heat efficiency because you're not getting blasted, and not lose any of your view. It's a super simple way to not lose any of your view. And what people don't understand about the window tinting is a lot of people are like, oh, well, I can just go, like you said, I'll go to the local hardware store and I'll just get it done that way. One small problem: tint, when you first put it on, shrinks. And if it shrinks, it'll crack your glass if you don't have the right kind.
What?
Yeah, yep.
So
So
you're the experts, clearly.
yeah, you got to have somebody who knows what they're doing, or you're going to have problems. So, but let
Right.
me get my notes up here on you, Miss Joelle. And I am saying it right, Joelle, right?
It's Joelle, yeah. Mm-hmm.
See? And
Yeah,
normally, most people, I butcher names.
yeah, it's one of those well, for a long time it was a really unusual name around these parts, but my parents were married in Paris. So all of the children have French names. So I was the eldest, so I ended up with Joëlle. My sister Ariane, so it's Ariane, then Guylaine, then Patrick. So we have all the French names as first names, and then the middle name was like either Irish or English, because
Okay,
if we did a French name, we could always choose our sort of English Irish middle name. So
go with. I
I'm
like.
Joëlle Kathleen. So yeah,
Do you ever use Kathleen?
I don't. It's funny because I can't relate to it at all. Actually, even as a kid, I didn't even want to be Joelle. I wanted to be Sandra because I thought that was a really cool name.
Where was it because you were really into Rocky Horror Picture Show and you wanted to be Sandra Day? But that's wasn't that Rocky
No,
Horror?
I
Or no,
actually,
that wasn't Rocky Horror. That was Grease.
that was
Grease.
Grease. Yeah. And I was thinking, so I was like, yeah, maybe 14 at the time when Grease came out. But yeah, I didn't spend my formative years here. I didn't come here until I was 16. I missed out a lot, like there are jokes that happen and I completely missed them because they're related to TV shows from, yeah.
So that's a great question. Though. So where did you grow up?
So I was born in England,
Mhm.
and then my father and my family got moved to New York. He got a job with the United Nations, and so he worked with the United Nations until he retired. Um, but we moved from New York to Santiago, Chile. So I lived in Chile from 60 to 74. I was there during the military overtaking of the government, the coup d'etat that was there when they the moneda and they killed Allende, the president, and Pinochet took over. We were there. So, and then after that, so like we left probably, so that was actually September of 1973, the coup
Wow.
d'etat, like the big blow up in Chile, Santiago happened. And we left in April of 74. So we moved to Geneva, Switzerland. And my father worked in Geneva for the rest of his career. And then a year, maybe two afterwards, we moved to France because it was cheaper. And so, but then I came here because my mother was American. She was from the area.
Okay.
I ended up living with my aunt here and finishing up my schooling.
I just want you to know that as you say all these locations, you make them sound way better than what they said. Like if the news was saying Chile, you make Chile sound like way better than what anyone else around here says. I just want you to understand.
Okay.
But you
Yeah,
know
it's a
what? That also no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's a beautiful country, and I haven't actually, I keep talking to my husband about this, about returning back. Actually, a funny story. So I've been in touch with this woman since I left in 74. She was like my
Okay.
next door neighbor, and we didn't speak English, so we'd write back and forth in Spanish. And 2 years ago, or is it 3 years ago? 2 3 years ago, she WhatsApped me and she said, "My son's taking me to New York." And I'm like, "I'm coming down to meet you." We hadn't seen each other in 50 years.
Wow.
And it was like the best. It was like the most amazing reunion of not seeing her since we'd left in 74. And like, yeah, so
That's
we have to
awesome.
go down. Yeah, we have this great open invitation to stay with her family. So, yeah.
That's super cool. Now I'm curious because as I'm refreshing myself on your notes here. Uh, I love this trusted guide in untangling relationships, client reforging past patterns and escaping self-defeating cycles, fostering personal growth and healing. And you develop the 7 sacred steps in a unique methodology combining expertise in education, psychology, and transformational coaching with over a decade of research. I'm curious before we even get into what all that is and how you help people to kind of break out of these patterns. With all this kind of world travel, I've always been a big fan of, I believe it was Mark Twain that said, "You can't be a racist if you travel. You just can't. It doesn't work." And I wonder with your travel and seeing the world and experiencing different cultures and experiencing different people, how much did that affect as you were creating the 7 sacred steps?
I love that question. Um, because it speaks to culture, right? It speaks
Right.
to the way that we're trained. Um, it had a big impact on the development of those sacred steps because for to begin with, I brought my own personal experience into this component, but also I wanted to create a sort of a framework and a structure where all people could come into it, no matter what their gender was, no matter what their preference was, no matter what their background was. And with this more of a, I don't know, an international, I don't even know what I call it, international, but just a different worldview, right? So
Right.
bringing that in allows me to then hold clients with a greater sense of openness.
Yeah, you're not
So
closed off to different viewpoints the way a typical
correct.
may be based on, their personal experiences. Your experiences are very broad.
Right. Well, they're very broad, but also like everybody has needs, right? And it doesn't matter where you're from. Everyone has the same basic needs, right? For belonging and for safety and for home and for and connection and for autonomy and all of those things. So if you can kind of get down to the underneath of everything's that's going on and you recognize the need that the individual has, their preference, their color, their viewpoint doesn't really matter. They're just trying to meet a need. And sometimes they're trying to meet a need in a way that doesn't actually work really well for them. So that's where the retraining process comes in.
See, I love that approach. So, were you originally and again, look, I'm always looking at my notes. So if you're wondering, like, why does this guy keep looking to the left? It's my notes.
Yeah.
It's just my notes. So were you a psychologist? Like, what was your training that got you to start going this way?
um, in my previous life, I was a school teacher. So 42 years I taught K through postgraduate. So I was an adjunct as well. So I taught graduate school and undergrad. And I was a foreign language teacher and an English major. But I was so interested in science, anatomy and physiology, psychology, sociology. I was always reading and taking like extra classes on those kinds of topics. And then when I decided to become a coach, I became even more interested in that because I could see the value of bringing those tools and technologies into the work that I was doing. So I don't know, like people ask me why I didn't become a therapist in the first place, and I would have avoided all that teaching stuff. But the teaching stuff is kind of what got me here
You didn't have
because I
enough
do a lot of
personal
educating of my students. What's that?
I said you didn't have enough personal problems to become a therapist. I'm a
Oh,
firm believer that people become therapists because they're trying to fix themselves through fixing other people.
but Sean, like that's I did have a lot of problems.
But no,
And
it wasn't enough to become a therapist, though. Like, I
not
firmly
enough to
believe.
become a therapist. Well, because in my upbringing, like my father was English, very stoic, Oxford graduate. This is what women's roles are, and it was almost Victorian his
Oh,
perspective.
oh,
And
please tell
women
me more.
very they did, darling. So
Oh,
so his
please.
perspective is that women go to university to make their husbands look good, so they can carry on
Oh,
like good conversations, so they can so that was the primary intention of my university education. So that was yeah. So I did have some problems.
that's
But
interesting.
the only option that was given to me was like teaching and nursing. Those were like, so you
Uh,
just kind of follow with the program, right? That was the program that was those were the options that I was given. So I took what I could get.
I mean, English nurses. I mean, there's a great history of those throughout the world in American military folklore. The English nurse
Mhm.
holds a very high esteemed place in the
Yeah.
American military folklore. So I get that one. I understand that one. And if you
Yeah.
don't understand what I'm saying there, folks, you haven't watched enough TV in your life, and go watch a few shows. So
Yeah,
so
call
and
them
folks, if
joy.
you're interested in what Joelle's got going on as we're going through this, or you want to reach out to her, scrolling along the bottom, you have Joëlle Lydon, JoEllelYdon, joellelydon.com. You can check out what she's got going on. If you have questions, curiosities as we're going through this, and you want to ask questions, please do. Make sure you're hitting that like and share and follow button. So all this is going on. You're a school teacher. At what point, an adjunct professor, at what point are you stepping away from all that and deciding to get into, coaching and all these different elements?
I had this interesting experience. I think it's still active. Organization called the Teacher Center would do these retreats for teachers. After teaching a school year, they would, you could go away and do some continuing education. And at one of those teacher retreats, a woman who spoke about what she did and and called it coaching. And while I was listening to her speak, and this is when I was still very actively teaching, like every hair on my body stood on end. And I was
Oh
just
wow.
like, this is really interesting. I'm finding this fascinating. I'm having this physiological and visceral response to what she's talking about. I feel like that's the next thing that I need to do. So when I leave teaching, this is where I'm going. And so what that led me to is to find a program that was an accredited program to become a certified coach. It was a program out of Australia. And so I did all of the required trainings for that. It was a 2-year program that I actually did in 1 year, because at that I was able to kind of complete it over a summer because my son at the time was 1 week with my husband, 1 week with me. So on the weeks that he was with my ex-husband, I would just like take all the classes, all the papers, do all the coaching, get all my 60 hours of training in and my 12 hours of supervised coaching and all my papers and everything. So I got it all done in a year. And then I started coaching. And I thought I really wanted to coach women on career changes. And it got that, I guess the greater plan had different ideas for me. So just end up doing what I'm doing, just out of, it was a very personal reason for me to end up doing the relationship coaching.
It's interesting because the relationship piece, I've spoke to several different relationship coaches over the years of doing the show, and most of them, you know, uh, are either focused on, hey, we need to break somebody, men need to stop being scared of women, or men need to find their own men groups. But I love your approach to breaking up patterns and understanding mismatches in partnerships. Because I think a lot of people are like, well, opposites attract. Actually, no, all the studies show that that's actually a bad thing. Like, you need to be in a relationship. Like, yes, you guys, you might like you might like grape jelly, and the other one might like strawberry jelly, but you both like jelly. That's the point here in
Yeah.
understanding those things. So, what are some of, the approaches that you use to kind of break those patterns up, or at least show somebody, here's your pattern and this is what you do?
So I'll answer that question, but I'll tell you like how I ended up doing the thing that I do
Yes,
now
awesome,
because I
please.
had to break my own pattern first. I
Well,
was
that's
my first coaching client.
my dad used to
So
always say charity starts at home.
right, exactly, exactly. So you know, with that crazy international background that I had, the container that I was raised in was a very abusive one. And so that that was kind of like the water I was swimming in. So
Okay.
when I left that container and I came to the United States, it made sense because I'd been trained um, to recognize abuse as a familiar form of love, that I would then seek out a partner and a husband who would continue that tradition. I married into an abusive situation. I was in that for 16 years. And then I left that situation and then found myself in another relationship 2 years later, recognized that I'd done a fair amount of work from the marriage, divorce, contentious divorce into that second relationship, which lasted 8 years. But by the end of that one, I was just like, I I keep attracting the same kind of ouch, the same kind of thing that devastates me. Like, what's wrong here? So I was in a program down in the city in New York. Um, and part of that program brought in panels of men to talk to the 250 men, to 50 women who were in the audience. And I remember sitting in that audience and listening to all these guys talk to the women and thinking to myself, they were paid, they were all set up to say these wonderful things. Guys aren't like this. And I realized, like, at the end of that, holy cow, I'm a card carrying member of the Men Are Pigs Club. I can't trust them. They're full of crap. They're out for one thing. They're like, I had all these beliefs around men that were really, really not helpful, while at the same time wanting to be in relationship with them. You see my problem?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. This is
Right?
what you're saying is absolutely fascinating to me. And I'm going to pause for a second. Folks, JoëlleLydon.com, JoEllelydon.com. It's so interesting to me that you're like, you came from an abusive relationship, which sounds like your father, whether it be physical, mental, we don't have to get into all that. And then went right into, well, this is love. This is how affection is shown. This is what I do, right into it in your personal relationships. And that's what I'm understanding in all this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I had, but I had actually had a model of what love looked like. There's a picture of them. So my mother, she first went to Paris and she met my father, stayed with a French family. And we only knew them as Mamie and Pépère. So like, grandma and grandpa.
Okay.
And Mamie and Pépère had lived through World War I together. They're a sweet little French couple, lived through World War I together, World War II together. They were so dedicated to each other. They didn't bicker but they just loved each other and they had each other's back. So for me, in my mind, like, I knew love was possible, but I also knew that what I had experienced was not what Mamie and Pépère were exhibiting. So, but if it was possible, there was evidence, and it was possible for me. So when I kind of came to that recognition, I thought, okay, so I got to change my mind around men. So I'm still in that program down in New York City, and with the support of my mentor at the time, I said, I'm going to start a project. I'm going to start doing research on men because I want to change my mind about them. Because I want to prove that what was on that stage was the truth, and what is in my head is the false. So I set out to do a project that lasted about a year, where I dated like a zillion guys, and I would only go out with them for the purposes of doing research on them. But I would tell them ahead of time what I was out for, what my purpose was, because there are guys who are looking for a commitment. And I wasn't looking for them. I was looking to change my mind. So those who wanted a commitment, I wanted to let them find their commitment because I wasn't going to be it. So, but I went out with like tons and tons and tons of men, and I learned so, so much. And I went in there with like set lots of purposes, but I'll just give you three. The first one was to leave them better than I found them, always. So they went out with a date. My intention was to always leave them feeling better when I found them. The second piece was to always ask for what I wanted and not like shy back from what I wanted.
What do you mean?
And that was a practice in itself, because like if I said I wanted to go, like I kind of want to go roller skating, but I'm afraid to ask and I don't know how to ask for that. Like little things, like how to ask for things and then be able to receive them without self-combusting, because women can't receive really well. So it was practice in asking and receiving. So sort of like surrender. And then the last piece of this for me, of this practice with men, the year-long project was that I would go home and do the opposite of what women typically do when they go out on dates with men. Because usually when they go out on dates with men, they'll go home and go, he didn't do this, he didn't pull out my chair, he didn't da-da-da, and they up one side and down the other. So instead I said, I'm going to take the complete opposite approach. I'm going to go home and I'm going to document and back and research all of the things that they did right. And I did that for an entire year. In the process, I got to finding that actually it doesn't matter who the man is. Every man had an element of something I was looking for. Every man had the potentiality of the one in them. And in that process, one man bubbled up as the most interesting candidate.
Now,
And I
does that
wasn't
mean
even looking at the
you
time.
kept going back to that man?
Well, when he became more interesting than the others, I actually dated more men because I didn't want to put my eggs in his basket and put too much pressure on the situation, because that would have been an old way of functioning and put a lot of pressure on him or me. I wanted to still be in delight and pleasure and fun. But then when it became like 5 months in, 6 months in, I'm like, I think I need to kind of like let these like people go and let's explore this. He's now my husband.
Oh,
He's still research.
Still doing research on him, even after
research on him. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what I find fascinating about that is, like, I don't know how I would personally react if I was going out or like you know what, I do know how I would react. It would be like an absolute challenge. Love the goblet. Would be an absolute challenge to me if I was dating if I approached a woman, I was like, "Hey, would you like to go out on a date?" And she was like, "Absolutely, I would like to go out on a date with you. But just understand I'm not committing to you. I'm gonna do research on you." Like that would be such a challenge to me, like, "Oh, you're gonna
Yeah.
find out how awesome I really am." Like I feel like most men are so competitive that they would put their best foot forward that entire time. Was there ever a concern in that process that maybe you weren't getting real legitimate who they were and it was more of that challenge competitive side coming through?
I don't see it so much as a competitive side as much as they were being of service. They wanted to help me. They wanted to help me change my mind about them. And they wanted to be a hero. And that's how I could leave them feeling better than I found them, because each time they got to feel like a hero.
I
So it
love it.
wasn't competition so much. It was really about seeing the beauty and I don't know, I just want to use the word delight. Like there's like this delight in men. So I feel like I've come like from this place of like, I've ripped up the card, right? By the way, like the men are pigs card gone, right? Because see men in such a very different light. But I know it's unusual for me to see men in this light because the women that I work with are card carrying members. So the work that I do, and also for men as well, because they have their version of like
Oh,
women as
absolutely.
well. So the work that I do in the retraining process is, let's update your antiquated beliefs around relationships and what it means to be feminine and masculine and dominant and submissive, and in relationship with what the roles are and what the agreements and spoken and unspoken should be. Let's kind of update all of that programming so that it actually meets the present need. Instead of having, like, let's say your 7-year-old who was, in my case, was abused, right? All of that, and have her directing how your relationships function. Because if she's directing the show, you're never going to end up in the kind of relationship that you say that you want. You're always going to be fighting yourself, keeping the card going, wanting the love, knowing it's possible. But if you don't do the work of kind of canceling these two things out and upgrading what's in here, then you'll never get to meet and
That's
create the kind of relationship that you want. Does that make sense,
it makes
Sean?
absolute sense to me. I mean, because what you're basically saying is, and I've heard this before, that our the relationships we have, whether it be with other people, not in a personal, like sexual type relationships, any relationship we have, it's really based on some form of a trauma, or, and I don't even say trauma, but some form of a dramatic situation that pauses us there and kind of says, this is what good is, this is what bad is. And it pauses us. And that's where we develop from there. Like in your case, it was the 7-year-old. You pause there, and that's what affection was. Or if you looked at whoever your best friend in the world was, another woman, that person either had a similar, or you could have positive, relations that way, good or bad. So what
Yeah.
you're saying makes absolute sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to, like, people don't necessarily, I mean, everyone has trauma of some sort or another, right? So
Right.
like, it's like a very specific incident or just chronic over a long period of time. But it's not, I think your upbringing kind of wires you in a particular way, right? Like the community that you grew up with, the culture from your family, the agreements, spoken and unspoken, right? Again, like some of the things like the girls do this and girls don't do that, boys do this and boys don't do that, girls are beautiful, like sugar and spice and everything that boys like, right? There's all of those unspoken things, even in our fairy tales, even in our nursery rhyme, are just baked into the culture, and we just kind of drink all that Kool-Aid, thinking like this is the way that things are. But then we have to be, I don't know, I'm 60, I'm going to be 62 this year. We get to be 62 and we're just like, yeah, the way that I'm working and the way that I'm relating is actually not working for me as an adult. I have to like upgrade and reparent myself so that I can then meet the kind of partner that I want to be with. And then not only, so I call that in the process, that the 7-step process, I call that part growing down. You create your root system, you get yourself really rooted in and anchored into like an upgraded belief system and storyline, and therefore your actions and your choices are different. And then when you meet somebody, you're kind of growing up because you've kind of done all these things that have upgraded your internal operating system. You bring in somebody else, now you've got a second variable. Does your work that you did to anchor yourself down actually stick? Because that second variable is going to really throw a little monkey in the works. And so can you stay true to yourself with this second variable? And
I
then
love
yeah. So, and that part is called growing up. And then the third part of this is like, of course, if you decide that the two of you are a match, you want to sustain it long term, then that's really about growing together. That's a whole other set of skills. So I tend to work with clients between like a minimum a year. And
wow.
usually clients stay with me for like 3 to 5 years, because that internal operating system that we do takes a long time. I mean, if you're like in your 50s and you've been doing the same thing for 50 years, it's going to take some time to train that, to practice something different and lay down new neural pathways for you to have a different experience.
I love your process. And look, folks, if you're out there and you're just joining us and you have questions for Joëlle, please go ahead and type them in. It's joellelydon.com. You can see what she has going on. She has a pretty cool goblet that she's drinking out of, which I think is pretty. I love that. I love a good
I know
goblet.
it's a very cool goblet.
She's going right to her English roots with the goblet there. Um, Kind of one of the things as you're talking here that I'm very fascinated by this when it comes to any type of psychiatry, psychology, coaching, all that. And I got to figure out who the lady was. I watched an interview with her and I should have wrote it down. Work, especially with what you're doing, dealing with people who have had issues in the past that have dictated how they build into relationships. We have a generation right now. We're going to kind of go backwards with generation for a second. We have a generation right now who has had more mental health, more safe spaces, more everything than you and I could ever have imagined in our lifetimes. And they have more mental health problems than any other one. Do you ever work with people to just kind of like there has to be an end? Like I feel like currently a lot of people use their trauma or their way that they're afraid to lose it because they think that's their identity. Well, this is the kind of person. Oh, look, look at that. I didn't really have my thumbs up. This is who I am. This is the kind of person I am. They can't lose that identity of their trauma or how
Yeah.
they are. How do you get people to break from that and kind of like, nope, let's reset that pattern, like the things you were just saying about step 1, 2, 3. How do you get them to break out of that and stop using that as their identity?
I love that question because we're bathing in a we're bathing kind of like in victim water these days, right? I could say you and I would not be having this conversation if I had continued to adopt a victim sort of state and energy and mentality. I think what's happening and the reason that there is so much distress is a lack of connection, a lack of intimacy, a lack of vulnerability, a lack of trust, a lack of truth. And so when I'm first working with a client who has some of those things going on, so I use one of the elements of in my coaching that I use is education. Because I come from a teaching background, once a teacher, always a teacher. So my client get modules, they get dropped into their client portal once a month, so I've got almost 4 years worth of modules created for them. But the very first one that they receive is to serve and support them in taking what I teach as personal and energetic responsibility for what they co-created, including the mess they find themselves in currently. And then from that, begin to learn how to manage their nervous system and their mindset. So the very first module that they receive has about 3 tools that are foundational to everything that I do, that are intended exclusively and to support them in taking responsibility every time they get regulated. So they can go back into regulation and they take an action from that place because they're taking action from a dysregulated place and things go to hell in a handbasket. But if you're like, all right, I know I'm dysregulated. Let me bring myself to a place of calm with this tool because you tend to be a tool. And then bring myself to a place of calm. Now I'll take an action because now I've got access to my frontal cortex. Now I can innovate and come up with a creative solution, or maybe have a difficult conversation without blowing somebody's village down. Right. So that's usually when I'm working with clients, that's the very first place that we go. And that's kind of first 3 months, like that's the main focus because they're just like all over the place.
Right. You've got to put everything into a bag or line it all out so you can figure out what you're dealing with at those times. Joëlle, I find this absolutely fascinating, especially that breaking the pattern, because we all know somebody in our lives and it can even be yourself, where you look at them and you're like, why are you with this person? They are the picture of the person that you tell me you hate in your life, or you don't want to ever deal with in your life, or you've tried to separate yourself from those type of people. And then I look at you and you go, you're in that same relationship that you don't want to be in. That kind of also brings up the question as I'm saying it, do you how do you or do you ever coach people? Do people come to you and be like, look, Joel, I know somebody who needs your help, or at least just needs a reality check, and I want to tell it to them, but I also don't want to be like the mean ogre that walks in and is like, your relationship is horrible. You're a horrible person. Break this now. Like they don't
Yeah.
want to be that. Like, how do you even approach that?
A person has to be who has to want to do it themselves, right? Like you can't, it's like you're trying to, like if you've seen people break out into fights, you can't reason with people who are in the middle of a fight, right?
No, not at all.
And
Yep.
it kind of, it reminds me of like, when I was in my first marriage, right? It's like, I didn't know that was not a good person for me. Just like how I was wired, right? And so when you look at people who are in those relationships, they may not even realize, because that's what love looks like for them, because that's
Yeah.
what self-worth looks like for them. That's what they feel that, but unless they've found a way to kind of zoom out and see like the full picture, and being willing to do the kind of inquiry and like introspective work necessary to begin to make change, then I mean, you could come up to me and say, well, so and so needs your help, but unless so and so wants my help, my hands are tied, right? Like you have to want to change the situation. And what's so interesting is that everybody says that they want transformation, but nobody wants to change.
Right. They want it to they want the Ozempic of it. They want the Ozempic version. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to put in the sweat equity. I don't want the long lasting side to it. I want the
Right.
Ozempic version to fix me. Don't you have like a needle or a pill? I can just take it and
Right.
I'll be a better
But it's like
person.
saying, I want daddy to take care of it, or I want mommy to take care of it, right? It's kind of like, give me a pill, and and then I don't have to do the real work and the hard work. But in the work
100%.
that I
Yep.
do, it's like I take you to the dojo. When you work with me, we enter the dojo
Ah,
and we do the katas,
yes.
and we practice the katas over. I'll explain that. So a dojo is like for like
Oh, yes.
martial art, and the katas are the different sort of movement forms.
Move.
And
Yep.
so and you practice them over and over and over again. So you go from this place of like conscious incompetence all the way to unconscious competence. Like it becomes second nature. Like when something happens, you just automatically go into that
Muscle
move.
memory.
And so, right. So it's like muscle memory. So when people work with me, they kind of enter a dojo. And it's a really important piece of the retraining process.
We're gonna start calling you Shihan Joel. Let me tell you about my relationships. You'll never see one like this ever again. Things will happen. We'll make this happen for you. I'm really good at that. That's years of watching kung fu movies on Saturday and
Right?
Sunday. Saturday and Sunday mornings with bad dubbed in language. I can do those movements all day long. And we're getting
Right.
close to closing the bar up here. With some of the things that you're doing, has there ever been a situation for you where you're providing all this information to clients, but where you have aha moments for teaching other people, where it's a situation where you're like, no, this is how I teach this. It's ABCD. And then all of a sudden you meet somebody and you're like, oh, wait a sec. This is really ABEDCB. Like you've had to change it and you changed your process.
Yes. My clients are teaching me all the time. So those modules that I've created, well, I knew that I had to have like the first step of the 7-step process about building emotional resilience. I knew that was like foundational. It didn't matter what's happening you got to at least be regulated, right? To shift your nervous system from like hypervigilance to a place of calm, right? To make that your new relational setting. But the modules that I created, I would notice certain friends and my clients. I'm like, oh my God, this one's experiencing that. And then this one's experiencing this. And wow, they're all kind of related. And I would create modules around that. And it would change the way that I was teaching because I was following their lead. They were teaching me. And then create the content. I would do all the research and I'll go down the rabbit hole of all the psychology and the sociology and all the things. And I'd pull together resources and videos and things for them. And that became the module to then support them with the thing that they were all tending to experience, like that they were all tending to struggle with. So then that would change my teaching. It would like enhance it. So yeah, I'm always following their lead because they're always teaching me. I mean, I've got a 7-step that it's tried and true. But I'm always curating the content to meet the needs of my clients. So it's not a one size fits all. It's always meeting them at their particular moment and at their particular struggle. So I can then support them with the next most aligned step.
That's interesting. That was what I was going to ask you next was with the 7 sacred steps that you've created, is it a type of thing where there's 7 of them, but they may not be, it's not like a 12-step program.
Correct.
Are they more, they're more fluid. There's 7 of them written down, but you might be starting at 7, ending at 1, moving to 3 and back to 5.
Absolutely, Sean. I love that you see that it's not a linear process because nothing ever is, right?
That's
so
amazing.
It's not a linear process at all.
They think that everything has to be linear because we're taught, read the instructions. Step 1, walk in the room. Step 2, have the conversation. This is interesting that you're going with a full flow. Now you've got the website, joellelydon.com. And for those of you that are joining us, Orchid, I hope you're still out there. She's an amazing Marine. And what you have to explain to me, Orchid, at some point, why you're just finally getting qualified as a conductor. She's a railroader like I used to be. But yeah, she's pretty awesome. She was a Marine like myself and now a railroader. She's been on the show. But my question is so in your process and how you're putting this together, what kind of things can people locate on the website? What's the benefit to going to the website?
Such a great question right now. I'm not entirely sure. I'm in that question myself. I mean, I've got a blog, pretty extensive. I was writing weekly for a really long time. And so there aren't that many, aside from the blog, there's an opportunity to kind of read about what I do and how I work. But I'm sort of in a transitional spot because I just wrote a book about the process that I use. And I just submitted it to my editor before Thanksgiving, have my first editorial call with her next week. So hoping we will publish this year and that I'll launch it this year. So right now the website is in a little bit of a transition point because once the book is written, then things will be sort of reframed around that. But what I have on there are events that I'm posting and the blog that I have and just the way that I work and the way that I work, giving some examples of how I work. And also it's a 7-step process of just an outline of what that is for the clients or for a prospective client. And then of course, if somebody wants to work with me, an opportunity to fill in an application. So there's a whole process that I use to determine fit because I'm not meant to work with everyone. Like if somebody's just looking to find a partner, then you need to go find a matchmaker. I'm not your gal. I'm not your girl. Right. When you're looking, so that sort of that application process is an opportunity for me to get clarity on what a person needs, and then we'll connect for a call and then really assess, am I a match for what they're looking for? And if I'm not, I'll send them someplace else. And so they can really get support service in a way that will really help them. Because as I said, I'm not meant to work with everyone. Not everyone wants to step into Jojo.
That's the and I have to tell you, I'm on your site right now and I'm looking and I'm trying to debate. Do I like the long hair or the kind of mid jawline hairdo?
I
Uh
know that's like,
Flip, I
that's
mean,
2020. That's the 20 version. And I'm just like, ugh, I'm done. So,
that's a tough one. I mean, because I'm digging that. I almost didn't recognize at first, and I was like, "Oh, there's the blue eyes." Now I see it. I'm good. But at first, I was like, "Oh, she's got like a no. That's not a stock photo. That's her." And I'll tell you, folks, it's worth it to check the website. You've got a retreat coming up here in June. I see the art retreat.
in July. Yeah,
Oh, this
it's
July
an
one
art
also.
retreat. Yeah. It's at the Weowaka Center for Women, which is really cool place. So one of the funny things that I do, not funny, haha, but just sort of
Neat.
interesting, I guess, is that I incorporate expressive arts and intentional creativity in the work that I do. So I use art as a process for my clients. So that
Okay.
makes the work that I do, again, a little bit unique. So the retreat that I'm doing in July at the Weowaka Center for Women is a 3-day retreat for women where we take relational issues to canvas. So I did it last year. This is the second annual. I'm really excited about that event. And I'm just right now trying to pull things together to put the copy together to bring people into the retreat. And then in February, the 22nd, I have a couples retreat. I'm going to be playing with couples and a single canvas. So that's going to be interesting. And that's at the Refuge Event Center, the event space in Troy.
Okay.
So yeah.
So I see. I find these things always interesting. Uh, when it comes to these retreats, because I mean, it really takes a lot. And I'm always honest, but it takes a lot for men in general for us to be like, all right, I'm gonna go on this retreat. And I feel like we put up like you get one or two extremes. You either get the absolute full guard up, like, all right, I'm here at this silly little retreat of yours, and they're hard to break down, or they're fluffy floaty, like way too into it where you're like, all right, back off. You're not the only person in the room. Has that kind of
Right.
been your experience? Like, I feel like that again, that goes back to that competitive side of men. For us, like, this is who we are. This is, we have to be one of
Yeah,
we like.
I don't know if I would use. I mean, I don't know if I see it so much as competitive, more as guarded.
Okay, different ways of putting up your guard.
Yeah. Really adorable. Just like, even the guarded ones, it's just like, for me, it's just like the challenge. If I have somebody like Rumpf in a workshop or at a retreat, right? I'm kind of like, so then I'm like, oh, how do I get to break you down? Ooh, I can really play with you, right? And so I don't necessarily see the harumph as a bad thing. I just see harumph as like it's a way for me to play.
I knew I
It's
would
an
get a
opportunity for me to
I
play.
knew I'd get a Blazing Saddles reference out of you at some point today. We started off with German, and then you went right into a harumph, and that's a
Right.
Blazing Saddles thing. So we went right at I knew I'd get one out of you sooner or later here. So, in these retreats, if somebody is interested, obviously they can go on the website. I see that they can get access to you, the starter kit, things of that nature. Are the retreats overnight? Are they just, hey, come up
Yeah.
at 8 and then leave? How does that part work?
No, so the 3-day Weowaka retreat is it's a 2 nights, 3 days.
Okay.
And we're there on site, and it's a really cool venue. Georgia O'Keeffe, if you're an artist, Georgia O'Keeffe used to paint there, used to spend
Oh,
summers
wow.
there. And yeah, it's like the longest running women operated women's center in the whole country. It's
Oh, I
like
didn't know that.
the longest running, Weowaka. It was actually created by the Arrow Shirt Company in Troy for the women who worked in the factory. And then it was a place for them to go find rest so then they could go back to the factory and continue to work. So it was created. So there are these beautiful Victorian buildings on site that are just really lovely. But it was originally created by the Arrow Shirt Company for
That's
the women.
fascinating. I had no idea. You know what's
Yep.
funny is I tell people all the time when I moved up here, most people, if you like art in any way, I like art, about the Hudson movement and Hudson art and that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. But I don't think a lot of people realize how much other art is in this valley or how much was involved in this valley and things of that nature that when you start doing your research, even most everybody knows I'm into comic books. We have a ton of comic book artists that still live in this area, operate in this area, big names out by you and
Mhm.
the biggest, what probably in your top 5 artists right now, a guy named Greg Capullo lives right there in Schenectady. He used to do the
Oh,
drawings on the he used to do the drawings for Price Chopper when they used to hand draw the fruit. He used to do those drawings.
really?
Uh-huh. And
Cool. Yeah.
that was one of his early jobs. But I mean, this is all fascinating. So again, folks, if you are interested in what Joelle's got going on, Joelle, Joelle, Lydon, Lydon.com. We got a couple minutes left. If you have any questions, you're curious about anything, please drop a comment to us. See if maybe we can answer those. You don't have to all be quiet. I am going to ask one more question before we close this all up. Is there anyone? Oh God, no, I can't do that. Can you build here's that we're going to put it this way because I almost said, is there anyone? And then I changed it. I don't like that. Have you ever considered reaching out? And Paul's going to be a guest next week. You should reach out to Paul and do a my hour version. Could you think Paul would do that? Do like a my hour version of like a day one with Joelle? That would be interesting.
Can you say more? I'm not sure I follow
So you know how
like a
like you have your day one in introduction and putting things
Mm,
together. I wonder if
yeah.
Paul would be willing to do some like a my hour version of that. Like, do you think
Huh.
there's a thing? Do you think there's a thing there?
There could be. I think there's a conversation to be had.
I mean, I think that would be interesting, and it would give
Yeah.
everybody the opportunity because we all have such unique things. It would be like me podcasting for my hour, or Denise doing a sales training with everybody in my hour. Do like a
Mm,
one-off my hour where like Paul's able to bring people together and like, hey, you're going to get an opportunity to tell a group of my hour people about what
got
you
it.
do and
Yeah.
see what how they feel about what you do. It'd be interesting.
I
I
think that
might
would be really fun because I would like to know like a lot more about what you do. And then
Yeah.
there's so many interesting people in that group and they speak, they speak and they share, but to go narrow and deep is always much more fun.
Yeah, see, and look, folks, if you're looking to get more narrow and deep on your relationships, make sure you're reaching out to Joelle, Lydon.com. She's gonna tell you all about it. She'll get you situated, help you to figure out your path. And now you heard us talking. This has kind of been the my hour stretch of the podcast here of late. We had Jennifer DeGraff last week. The week prior to that was Karen
Yeah.
Lombardo. 2 weeks prior, who do we have? We've had a little bit of everybody here we had Rose Miller a couple of weeks
Mm,
ago. We had Kat
cat,
Cultivates.
pet.
Yep, we
Yeah.
had Kat a few weeks ago, and we're going to top it all off here with next week. Paul's going to be coming on, and Paul is the creator of My Hour, which what I think we're going to be focusing on with him is, he's got a strong history of team building and putting people together and marketing. But how did he develop this thing that I don't know about you, Joel, but any of the just about any of the online networking that I was doing during COVID is dead. It's gone.
Mhm.
Like, I
Yeah.
know
We're
I
in a
know
very different environment.
yeah, like, I
Yeah.
know of one that's left, and they do it, like, once a month. 518 Connect is, like, once a month, but really, the online networking world has died. How has his stayed going and continues on with all of us
Mm,
still joining up and new people joining all the time? So that's what we're gonna be talking about with Paul is how do you build your own networking? How do you build your own piece? That'll be next week. If you're finding, as we say every week, if you're finding me through Joelle or Joelle through me, do us a favor, hit the like, share, follow, throw this out to all your yard sale sites that you're a member of. Make them all. Go ahead and ban me from there. I don't care. do all those kind of things. That's how this gets found. That's how Joelle's message gets out there and gets found. People know about what she's got going on, know about what we have going on here. It really does matter. It really is that important to both of us to make those things happen. Now, Joëlle, I know you've binged I think this is 269. I have to look. You've binged all 268 other episodes. You're fully immersed, as I tell everyone, in all the things that are going on with the Above the Bar podcast. But just in case you don't remember the ending, and don't log off on me afterwards, we'll talk for a couple of minutes. The guest always gets the final word. So what's the final word tonight?
Hold each other tight.
All righty, folks, be sure to push your stool in. This has been a Second Front podcast presentation found on Apple, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be found.